Hello and welcome to episode number 36 of Chel Squared. I'm your host, Andrew Chelney, and as per usual, we've got a ton to talk about today. Before we get into it here, please make sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at Chel Squared and on Facebook at Chel Squared for more hot takes, news about future guests, poll questions, and a whole lot more. Please rate the show if you enjoy listening. It means a lot to me. And every time you either like the show on SoundCloud, give it a rating on iTunes, follow it on Spotify, etc. A puppy gets a hug from its owner. I don't make the rules here, just making sure you are in the know. If you prefer listening to podcasts on YouTube, search Chel Squared Podcast, and the show is there too. The trade deadline is just a couple of days away, which means social media is filled with people scouting where scouts are, plane tracking, and of course overreacting when a player isn't at practice. You gotta love it. You gotta love it. Few trades happened since last week's episode. Talbot to Philadelphia, and of course Rangers legend Ryan Spooner to Vancouver were the biggest trades. A couple of bigger trades went down yesterday and today that we'll be talking about too. Charlie Coyle got shipped to the Boston Bruins for Ryan Donato and a 5th-round pick, and today the Caps acquired, of course, another Rangers legend, Carl Hagelin, from the LA Kings for a 2019 3rd-round pick and a 2020 conditional 6th. Big names still on the board. You got Duchesne, Stone, Dzingel, Panarin, potentially. There's so many big names on the board. This is going to be one wild and crazy weekend. Big smile on my face just thinking about it. You gotta love this time of year. One team so far, though, has been pretty quiet. The Calgary Flames is the team I'm talking about here. Currently on top of the Western Conference with 81 points. They've won 3 in a row. Second best team in the league. Of course, behind the Lightning with 96 points that will never lose ever again. It seems like they are almost unbeatable. But it's not all peaches in Calgary. James Neal has been, I could say, a major disappointment since signing that big contract last offseason. He's making $5.75 million until 2023. By the way, he's got 5 goals and 10 assists in 55 games. It's not good for the real deal, James Neal. David Rittich has been a much-needed relief for the Flames in net this season. Mike Smith just hasn't been good enough this season. .892 save percentage, and according to Hockey Reference, has a goal saved above average of -13. By the way, that's his lowest since the 14-15 season. As a member of the Coyotes, his record that season was 14-42-5. This season, he's 17-11-2. Goals saved above average in the 14-15 season was -20.13. But even then, his save percentage was .904. How secure is the blue paint in Calgary? Really, we'll dive into that. The Flames only have around $1.25 million in cap space to work with, according to Cap Friendly. It won't get easier, though, because they have some big names whose contracts are expiring, names like Sam Bennett, Tkachuk, and of course, both goalies need new deals. How will Brad Treliving deal with this while trying to bolster his team now? Say money was no object, where can the Flames improve the most, and what's the most realistic approach to getting that done? Also, what's the future of this team looking like? The Flames have some interesting names in their minor leagues, like gold medalist Tyler Parsons in net for the Stockton Heat, 21 years old, 2017 gold medalist in the World Juniors for Team USA. 20-year-old Juuso Valimaki was taken 16th overall in the 2017 draft, played 22 games with the Flames this season. Is the future of the Calgary Flames in good hands? We'll get into that, the poll question, and a whole lot more. Joining me this week is Flames Nation writer Ryan Pike. Ryan, what's up?
How you doing?
I'm doing great. No complaints here. How about you?
Not too bad. It's a busy time of year. I think, especially the way the Flames are going this year. It's been busy basically since October onward. So we'll see how the next 2 months go.
For sure. Before we get into the super nitty-gritty here, $1 million question for you, Ryan. What's one artist or band that you know deep in your heart, deep in your soul, isn't that great, but you enjoy listening to anyway? If you have one.
My Vegas friends will be mad at me, but I'm gonna say the Killers. They're Like
Ooh.
they're very good at a very specific kind of music, and
Hmm.
they don't have a lot of range. So I can see people saying, "Oh, they're not that good," but the one type of song they play the hell out of.
I can see what you mean. I am a Killers fan, so that kind of hurts me on the inside a little bit, but I can see what you mean by that. My band would have to be Five Finger Death Punch. I don't know how into metal you are, but I am huge into metal, and Five Finger Death Punch is that band that you just know isn't that good. They try to sound super edgy. Their lyrics are edgy and they try to be like this in your face kind of power group that's super heavy and this and that. And you take a look and you take a look at their appearance and their sound and this and that. It just falls apart so quickly, and yet they have this special place in my heart that and I saw them live a couple of years ago and they were pretty okay, but I just know that they're not that great, especially coming from, I mean, I've seen Iron Maiden twice, I've seen Megadeth, I've seen all these big bands, and Five Finger Death Punch, FFDP, definitely not the best band. But I like them anyway. It's just one of those things, and you have that with the Killers as well. They have their niche, and they're not really good at anything else, but they do their niche pretty well. And I guess that's why I'm an FFDP fan.
Yeah, much like hockey players, bands don't have to be everything to everyone. They just have to be whatever they are to the people that need them to be that. So
That's true. That's very true. So the Calgary Flames here, Ryan, second best team in the league, obviously behind the Lightning, who will never be beaten again for the rest of the time. They haven't made a move yet. Is there a reason behind that, in your opinion? Because again, as I said in the opening, they don't have a whole lot of cap space, but are they looking at fixing something? What is that something that, in your opinion, either needs to be fixed or to be bolstered?
well, I think you sort of hinted at one of the reasons why they haven't really made a move yet is the longer they wait, the more cap space they can cram underneath the cap ceiling this year and still be compliant. So it's in their best interest to wait as long as humanly possible before they make a move, especially if it's for somebody with a decent cap hit, because all the cap hits during the season become prorated. So a $5 million player only is really worth under the cap about a quarter of that by the trade deadline. So it's in their best interest to wait a bit. But also, to a certain extent, we can put the blame on the Ottawa Senators. The Ottawa Senators have 3 or 4 of the most compelling pending unrestricted free agents in Ryan Dzingel, Matt Duchene, and Mark Stone.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look, especially Duchene and Mark Stone, a lot of teams are sniffing around them going, ooh, imagine Matt Duchene on the Jets or Mark Stone on the Flames. It sounds pretty exciting, and it could be something that turns a pretty good team into potentially a Tampa Bay style powerhouse. Of course, Ottawa knows that, so they would like to keep them, and if they don't keep them, they would like to get a king's ransom for them. So, waiting to a lot of the waiting has been a wait and see thing with the general manager of the Senators, Pierre Dorion, kicking tires with his pending free agents, figuring out, do they want to stay? Is there a way they can fit them in? And as a result, really, outside of a few, minor moves that we've seen so far, no one has really made a major deal. You can make a case that the Charlie Coyle deal is kind of major, but he's sort of a niche players, and I think it was basically Boston circling down on a type of player they really wanted. But if you look at even the secondary rental market, guys like Gustav Nyquist, Mats Zuccarello, Kevin Hayes, guys like that, they haven't really been jumped on yet either, because I think the market is basically the big teams in the West, particularly looking to load up and waiting and seeing if Ottawa is gonna divulge those players out. Because if they are, then all of a sudden there's going to be a bidding war, and if there's not, then everyone's going to scramble over and try to snap up Matt Zuccarello. Coincidentally, as we're recording this, Brad Treliving is in Minnesota at the Wild Rangers game, scouting Matt Zuccarello and Kevin Hayes. So there's a lot of things going on. I think there's a lot of dominoes that are sort of set up, and they could topple very, very quickly once Ottawa makes the decision with what's going on with their players.
Yeah, I have the Rangers game on my TV as per usual, and Matt Zuccarello. I mean, I'm sure people that have listened to the show before are just tired of me saying this, but Matt Zuccarello, Kevin Hayes are wonderful, excellent players. Especially, I mean, Kevin Hayes and Matt Zuccarello have different skill sets, but Matt Zuccarello. This is one of the best visionaries in this game, and I mean that in a way that he sees the ice that other players just don't see. He sees everyone where they are, where they will be, where they were, and where people should be. He is everywhere on the ice. He sees the puck, even when he doesn't see it, he knows where it is. Matt Zuccarello also is one of the best passers in the league. I feel like that's an underappreciated aspect of his game, and Rangers fans have known about this for a while. But Matt Zuccarello is just the some of the passes that he's made throughout his career here has been just exceptional. It's through the legs, behind the net, through the whatever he needs to do to get the puck to whoever he needs that puck to go to, it'll happen. Whether or not the defense knows the pass is coming, it doesn't matter. Matt Zuccarello will somehow get that puck through to whoever needs that puck the most. And Kevin Hayes has been having a great season for the Rangers as well. And I'm not Jeff Gordon. I'm not a general manager in this league. I'm not a scout either. So whatever scouting that I'm saying right now probably doesn't mean much in the whole scheme of things. But I mean, Matt Zuccarello and Kevin Hayes are definitely two names that would improve any team immediately, absolutely immediately. But one name that I want to talk to you about, and I mentioned this in the opening, you guys, the Flames got a pretty big name in free agency with James Neal, and then it sounded like Calgary was excited because he was doing so well in Vegas, and of course he's a prolific scorer in Pittsburgh and in Nashville and throughout his entire career. But he's only got 5 goals this season, 10 assists, so 15 points in 55 games. He's still making just under $6 million until 2023. What about his game have you seen that just either isn't clicking or isn't going well, or maybe he's gripping the stick a little too tightly? What is it about James Neal that is contributing to his not so great score sheet this season?
I'll start off by just saying a name, Elias Lindholm. I think it's when the Flames got James Neal in free agency, I think it was logical to sort of look and sort of slot players in, because they'd gotten Lindholm at the draft, and I don't think it'd be unfair to say that the thought process is probably, okay, you put James Neal on that top line with Gaudreau and Sean Monahan, and then you put Lindholm, really good two-way player in Carolina, really smart, cerebral player, can take faceoffs. Okay, you could probably put him on a line with Tkachuk and Michael Backlund, and then you'd have a good top line with established scorers and a good second line with some good two-way players and a gritty guy in the way of Matthew Tkachuk. Okay, that'll work. And then, put Michael Frolik down on the third line, and the third line's pretty good, and then you're probably looking in good shape. And sure, the third line might not get a lot of opportunities to score because it's the third line, but who cares? If you have 2 lines that can score and perform really well, who cares, right? The problem is when the Flames went to training camp, Sean Monahan was recovering from some. He had 4 surgeries in the offseason, one of which was, I believe, a hand or a wrist. And part of his recovery plan was it was recommended that the Flames limit how many faceoffs Sean Monahan took in the preseason. So as a result, new head coach Bill Peters decided, okay, well, Bill Peters had Lindholm in Carolina. He went, okay, put Lindholm on that the top line for a while. Gaudreau can't take faceoffs, but if you put Lindholm on that line, Lindholm can take faceoffs for a little bit. And once the preseason's out of the way, then you can reshuffle the lines and go with your real lines. But the good news for the Flames and bad news for James Neal is that Lindholm just found a fit on that line and really hasn't left the top six since. He's been, up until basically this week, he's been a fixture on the right side of the top line. He has 69 points in 60 games this year. So he's already set career highs in goals and points. His plus minus is insane. He's getting scoring chances. He's on the power play. He's on the penalty kill. Elias Lindholm just playing a ton. So bad news is that means, okay, James Neal, your top line spot probably isn't going to work. Okay, James Neal, can you play a shutdown two-way checking role with Backlund and Tkachuk? All due respect to James Neal, probably not. I don't think he quite has the mobility for that. He's a very talented offensive player, but his defensive zone play is he's okay. It's not what brought him to the dance, and his play away from the puck isn't really what you pay him for. You pay him to score goals. So okay, you probably can't put him on that second line. So Michael Frolik has been playing on that second line primarily with Backlund and Tkachuk, and as a result, Neal has been getting third line minutes with some combination of Sam Bennett, Mark Jankowski, and Derek Ryan, which, all due respect to those guys, they're not exactly the offensive talents that are Gaudreau and Monahan, and they're not exactly the two-way, recover the puck and feed it to you guys that Tkachuk and Backlund are. So just because of performance and circumstance, Neal hasn't really had much of a chance to play, big reps. He isn't playing in the top six. He hasn't all season. He isn't playing on the top power play unit because it's been working. So he's been on sort of as part of the mixture of guys they have on that second power play unit. And as a result, when you have a power play unit that has guys that are scoring, the second unit doesn't really get out there very much. So it's been a bit of a challenge, I think, for him, is just sort of getting his mind around the fact that, for now, the team is winning. So I don't think he's too unhappy with the results, but I think, he's a proud guy. He was a big piece of what made things work on long playoff runs he went on in Pittsburgh and Nashville and Vegas. And I think to a certain extent, it probably, burns him a little bit that he's not a bigger piece of the puzzle. But, while the team's winning, I think he's probably just going to be content to sort of go along for the ride. And I think, he's easily the player on the team that has the most, playoff experience. I think he has 100 games, almost twice as many as the next nearest teammate. He's been in the playoffs, I think, 8 or 9 seasons in a row for usually at least a couple rounds. So he's played a ton. And especially as players get nicked up down the stretch, I think when he returns from his injury, I think will end up being a big piece with them. But yeah, I don't think it's unfair to say that 5 goals in 60 whatever games has been a bit of a disappointment. I think he'd have been as much, but when your team is fighting for a championship or a division title, I don't think anyone's really going to shed too many tears for him.
That's fair. I mean, but again, you take a look at his contract, and I feel like with James Neal, even though he's playing third line minutes, you would hope to see at least double-digit goals by now. Obviously, I don't want to say he's a 60, 70 goal scorer right now, but I would hope for at least 10 goals on the season, especially with his contract. So while the diminished role for him, I guess, he sort of fits because there's literally no room at the top six. But again, the Flames need to pay him almost $6 million until 2023. Is this a long-term thing for James Neal? Because if it is, then they are paying someone who is scoring, I'm going to round to say 20 points a season now, $6 million. And I don't need to tell you this, but that's not great, right? You don't want to pay a 20-point scorer $6 million a year. So is this long term? Is this what's best for Calgary? Because if it is, and James Neal fits into that role, that's fine. But that contract it has to be a big negative, is it not?
It can, it can't be. I think the big thing with Neal is that he's been getting his chances. He's just been perennially unlucky. I'm looking at the stats sheet now. So of the Flames have used 18 different forwards this year. Neal is 15th in shooting percentage. Neal has been Neal has twice as many shots on goal as Derek Ryan, and Derek Ryan has one more goal because his shooting percentage is double him. Neal has 122 shots. The Flames have, I think, 6 guys with more shots than him. Every single one of them has a shooting percentage at least double his. Backlund shooting 11%, Tkachuk 16%, Lindholm is shooting at 17%, Monahan just a bit below 17%, Gaudreau at 16%. James Neal is scoring on 4% of his shots. That is abysmal. But it also means he's getting his chances. It's just the puck's finding a way to not go in for him. It's sort of a I don't like using the cop out answers of it's his percentages. But if he was getting no shots and no chances and wasn't scoring, I think people would be more worried because where the hell is Neal? But Neal's been noticeable. He has more shots on goal than Sam Bennett. He has more shots on goal than Michael Frolik. He has way more shots on goal than Mark Jankowski. All those guys have twice as many goals as he does, simply because their shots are going in. So hopefully when he returns for his sake and for his sanity, the puck goes in a bit more often. But Neal's a guy. He's just pulling up now. His career, including this year, his career shooting percentage is 12%, like 11.6%. Looking the last few years, he's been scoring just the last full seasons. Vegas last year, 12.4. Nashville year before, 11.4. Nashville year before that, 11.6. Then 10.4, 11.3, 15.4, 12.2. And then that one weird year he was splitting time between Dallas and Pittsburgh. He was shooting at about 11 or 12%. So he is a guy who flat out he scores it. He gets a lot of shots and he scores a lot of goals because he knows where to shoot from. This year he just has abysmal luck, and I think hopefully like I said, for his sanity, his numbers sort of take a bit of a turn for him. But the nice thing for him is at least it's not like his shooting percentages get much lower. So he seems like a guy who's just primed for a lot of pucks to go in all at once. And just thankfully for him, when he gets back, it'll be in the stretch drive or the playoffs. So the Flames could probably use some scoring at that point.
For sure. Talk to me a little bit about the approach that Bill Peters has brought to this team, because you've had Glenn Gulletson for the past few years. That hasn't really worked out great for the Calgary Flames, and now Bill Peters comes in after being in Carolina for a little bit. What's the difference, either in the players or the way that they play, or maybe off the ice, there's sort of a noticeable difference? Where is that line between what worked for Gulletson / what didn't work for Gulletson, and now with Peters as the reigning coach in Calgary? What's the difference there, and what have you seen that has really kind of defined the line between Gulletson's era of coaching the Flames versus Peters' era?
I think I feel bad that I don't remember who coined this phrase, because I'd like to give credit where it's due. But one of my media colleagues in Calgary, their phrasing was, it's the Three Bears approach to coaching. When the Flames began the rebuild and started to progress out of the rebuild, their head coach is Bob Hartley, and Hartley is a guy who really emphasizes working hard and work ethic and stuff. But he, I don't think it's unfair to say he's not a very good tactical coach. He's the type of guy that, when the team is down and, you got to figure out, you need to get another goal, his mindset would be, well, guys, you just need to work harder. And, first couple of years of a rebuild, and you have a young team that's just sort of getting their feet under them. Work harder is not a bad way of looking at things, but at a certain point, it starts falling on deaf ears, because you can only be told to work hard so often before you think, okay, well, let's come up with something better here. On the other hand, Glenn Gulletson was sort of on the other end of the spectrum. Not much of a hard ass, really nice guy, really good guy, really smart tactical coach. really big on systems and tacticalness and being prepared. He'd have like weird plays set up in key times of games. But for him, I think it was just a case of he was trying to emphasize, tried to build relationships with the guys, just sort of being a good guy and caring about them, and they were soldiers under Hartley and under Gulletson. They were just his friends, and he wanted to make sure that everyone's doing well and feeling well, which is a nice way of doing it, but it just didn't quite work out for the Flames. Bill Peters is sort of the just right bed in the Three Bears scenario, where Hartley might have been a bit too hard on the players and not quite as tactical enough, and Gulletson might have been a bit too tactical and a bit too soft on the players. But it seems as if so far Bill is sort of a just right middle ground, because he's a smart tactical coach. He didn't really throw out a lot of the systems. He sort of added some tweaks to a lot of systems Gulletson was already using, because the Flames were just a really good possession team that just couldn't get that extra 2 or 3% out of the players they needed to win. But really, really smart tactical coach. He's emphasized his hard work, but he's a pretty blunt guy. Where you stand with Bill most of the time, because if he thinks the player's playing well, he'll say they're playing well. If he thinks the player's not playing well, he might not be as explicit with it as he was about Eddie Lack during his time in Carolina, but he's not a guy to mince words. Like he's not gonna praise a guy who doesn't deserve it. So he's been a pretty good fit here. The biggest difference I think between him and Glenn Gulletson, outside of him being a bit harder on the players, has been in-game adjustments. Glenn was a guy who trusted his lines and trusted his guys, and if the team was down 1 or 2 goals halfway through, he'd just be like, let's see how the guys work out. He'd be betting on his players. This year, the Flames also brought in addition to Gulletson, or not in addition to Gulletson, in addition to Bill Peters, they brought in Jeff Ward as an associate coach, who's previously ran the power play in Boston and New Jersey. And the other thing that Jeff Ward helps out with his sort of tactics. So they use Marty Jelena as sort of an eye in the sky to sort of see what tendencies are, and they feed that information down to Ward and Bill Peters. And really often, if the Flames are playing well, they keep rolling 4 lines. But if they're down or they're tied or something's not working, they shuffle the lines. They cut the bench down. Frequently in the third period, if they're down a goal or tied, they're only going to run 3 lines of guys because they want everyone to sort of be pushing. So that's another big thing, because if you're not performing, you're not going to play as much, because this is a team that their standard right now is that they feel like they're in a spot where they can win, and so they want to win games, and they don't really want to lose a 1-goal game because they stuck with their guns. They want to win by whatever means they can. So they've been really aggressive at sort of shuffling lines, changing up lines, moving players around, cutting the bench down to 2 or 3 lines, and so far it's worked. That's pretty much the big changes with these guys. But Glenn and Bill are both really cerebral guys, and they're both really up on sort of crazy tactics at times. So it's been pretty interesting to sort of just watch them and sort of see how similar they are.
Bill also, as far as I know, I could be wrong about this, but as far as I know, is also a big analytics guy. So, and I don't know how much of an analytics person Glenn Gulletson was, but I do feel as though Bill either has a better grasp on analytics or constantly uses it to his advantage day in and day out. And I'm looking at your lineup right now for the Flames. I mean, you've got obviously the big guns in Gaudreau and Lindholm and Matthew Tkachuk. Mark Giordano has 58 points in 58 games. He's 35 years old, doesn't appear to be 35 at all. There's some really big names that are putting up big-time points for the Flames, but if you had to pick either a position or an outright kind of second, I don't know, for example, second line winger or top 4 defenseman, where do you think the Flames should improve right now? Like, what's the one position that you think they will flame out? Obviously, no pun intended. But if they don't fix this particular position right now, they're in trouble.
I don't know so much, if they're in a position where they absolutely need to do anything. I think they've done a good job sort of just building depth in their lineup. Um, I think, the talk of them looking at adding another winger could be very useful because, I think the thing that's made them so good this year has been their versatility because, as much as I want to say that Goldson, he really didn't want to tinker with his lineup, but if you want to be sort of a defender of his, he didn't really have much to work with in terms of some versatility because, like this year, for example, the Flames have, Elias Lindholm can play up the middle or on the wing. Austin Czarnik can play up the middle or on the wing. Derek Ryan, same thing. So they have a bunch of guys on the right side who can take faceoffs. They have a bunch of left-handed defense or left-handed forwards like Sam Bennett now. He can play either side. Frolic can play either side. Kachuk can play either side. So they've had the ability this year, especially, to just sort of shuffle guys around into different spots. And I think that's sort of given them different looks and made them harder to game plan against. And I think what can make them even more, harder to game plan against, and I think the reason why it keeps coming up is, adding some more depth because, the Flames arguably have, maybe six really good top six players, maybe seven if you want to bring in Neal because Neal's got that the offensive mindset. And he's getting close to being a full, basically a full timer there. Sam Bennett's getting up there too. But if you added another top six body, all of a sudden, maybe that bumps for a leak down to the third line, and all of a sudden you have a much more dangerous third line because you got two really strong top two lines that can just grind the other team, and then your third line doesn't have that much of a drop off. And I think just adding a bit of depth will sort of give them maybe multiple second lines, maybe multiple first lines, something like that. And I think that would allow them just to roll lines because, we saw this on the Flames' last road trip. They're a good team, a much better team they've been in probably decades, but they're still kind of vulnerable to line matching, especially on the road. So I think being able to sort of give them a bit more depth at the high level would help them out. There's also some whispers about them looking at some depth defensemen. Right now, their third pairing is a pair of rookies. It has been a pair of rookies all season, and bless their hearts, but rookies make mistakes. And I think the big challenge for them is, you don't want to have a rookie's development stymied by them sort of getting in their own head by screwing up in a key playoff game. So maybe they're going to look at bringing in a depth defenseman. It won't be someone very expensive. Elliot Friedman sort of was writing in 31 Thoughts that someone like Patrick Nemeth from Colorado might be a fit because he's on an expiring contract and he's not that expensive and he sort of has that kind of playing style they like. So that could be a fit. But those are basically the two things I could see them doing before the deadline. And I think the two things that they want to do that would make sense. But on the other hand, like if they do nothing, it wouldn't shock me. They didn't have a first round draft pick last year. They didn't have a first round draft pick in 2015. So they I think there's some appetite on their part of just going with the guys they have that have gotten them to this point, and then just sort of seeing where it goes. But nothing's guaranteed. And when your best player on the team is a 35-year-old defenseman, you don't know when he's going to be able to have this kind of a season again. And they have their cards are pretty good this year, so I can sort of see the rationale of pushing their chips to the middle and seeing where things go.
Well, again, like we said in the opening, the Flames don't really have a lot of cap space to work with, just under $1.25 million. So if they were looking at adding a top six forward or a winger or what have you, they would have to either eat salary or shed salary, or they would have to do some sort of salary maneuver in order to make that happen, because there's not a whole lot of top six forwards that, one, are available and two, are super duper cheap. So if they were to acquire one of those players, they would, I would assume, have to trade someone with a sizable contract in return, and then maybe give up an additional pick in the deal, because they won't be able to fit that contract in to their cap space, because they don't have a lot of it to begin with. So what's the plan in terms of the Flames wanting to acquire potentially a winger or someone of that sort, but they don't really have a lot of maneuverability to do that without having to shed salary in return.
I think they should be all right. Much on cap friendly now, and I think the deadline cap space that they define, that's the amount of full cap hits they can add while still being below, is about 5.7. So it's tight. If you add anyone of note, let's say they add Matt Zuccarello, he's making about 4.5. So that'll basically take away all their wiggle room. So they could do that without having to do too much maneuvering. But I could see them potentially looking at a hockey trade. They have some players in the system who have some salary. They have some guys in the team. Like Michael Frolik's agent was sort of making rumblings about he wanted his player to be a bit more prominent. But on the other hand, I don't think they really want to take away from a group that's brought this far. So I think they're going to do whatever they can to avoid taking players off their current roster and just adding to the group they already have if they do anything. So I don't know. Treliving and his hockey ops group have been very creative in the past with sort of maneuverings, and they're willing to retain salary and move things around. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what they come up with.
No, you're totally right on that one, and I would have to agree. This actually leads into my poll question for this week that I posted a little late today. I meant to post it a little earlier, but this got just under 90 votes. The question is, I'm going to read you the question, read you the 4 choices, and I would like your answer to this poll without me telling you which choice is in the lead here. So the question is, say the Flames stand pat and don't make any trades at all. How far would they make it in the postseason? So the choices were first round exit, second round exit, lose in the Western Conference Final, or make it to the final. Which of those 4 do you think would be the most realistic option if they hypothetically stood pat and didn't do anything?
If they don't do anything, I could see them going to the if they don't do anything, I could see them making it to the conference finals.
Mm-hmm. The choice here by far, it seems like, is a second round exit. The first round exit has 13% of the vote. Second round exit has 65% of the vote. Lose in the Western Conference Finals, it has 19%, and make it to the final has 3% of the vote. And I also want to reference Rob Bell replied to the tweet. He said it's his ad is at Rob_ on his phone. He said completely depends on if they finish first in their division or if the Sharks catch them. The West wild cards are a collective mess, and they are. Either way, are they realistically riding David Rittich any farther than round 2? And this is a very interesting point that Rob brought up because, as I said in the opening, I mean, Mike Smith hasn't been good this season, and it's disappointing to see. But Rittich has been better than Smith. Not quite the all-star, right, that they would hope to see, but 9/11 save percentage is pretty good for a starting goaltender in this league. What do you think about that opinion? I mean, it does matter where they end up, obviously, because it depends on who they play, and then the rest of that is obvious. But the goaltenders, Mike Smith, not that great. David has been a pretty solid starter, right? Because I would assume that Mike Smith, just judging by his stats on paper, obviously you watch the Flames more than I do, so there might be a piece of this puzzle that I'm missing here. But it seems to me like Rittich is now the starting goaltender, but at the same time, how confident are you in his ability to carry this team to not only a first or second round matchup, but also potentially even a third or a final spot? How are you feeling on these two goaltenders?
Better than I was at the beginning of the season. I think Mike Smith, he works his bag off, but let's be honest, he's 36, turning 37 next month. There's not a lot of exceptional 37-year-old goaltenders in the league. Smith has had some injury trouble the last 3-4 years. Soft tissue injuries, and those things tend to happen when you get up in the age. Even non-athletes. I find in my 30s I'm a little bit sore than I was in my 20s. It's just life. But Smith's been a good soldier of the Flames this year. He admittedly was not good in October, November, December, and I think he's started to turn his game around. He's started 4 games in a row for the Flames. He's won 3 of them. His nice play has sort of coincided with David Rittich cooling off a little bit. Rittich still has just a gaudy win-loss record. I think he's 25-5 on the season. His record was even better until he sort of had a couple crappy games by his standards. But I think the Flames will probably end up doing what they did a couple years ago when they made the playoffs in 2015 when they beat the Vancouver Canucks in the first round and then went to the second round for the first time since 2004. They just rotated goalie. It's just essentially win and you're in, and if you lose, you might not start the next game. And I think they're at a point now where they have 2 goaltenders that they feel pretty good about. Do they feel amazing about them? Maybe not. Rittich's 26 and he still hasn't. This is his first full NHL season. So you're still trying to figure out what he is. And I think there's still some layers of the onion to be pulled back in terms of figuring out exactly what he's made of at this level. But there's something there, and they got him for cheap, and they're probably going to be able to re-sign him cheaper than they'd be able to get somebody in the open market who is as good. And Smith. Smith is 30. He's a 36, turning 37, and he's probably in the last year or two of his NHL career. I don't know if there's much of an appetite for the Flames to bring him back as a starter, and I don't know if he really wants to come back as a backup. And I don't know if there's many NHL teams who would want to bring back a 37-year-old guy as a backup, to be honest with you. So who's to say what's going to happen in his future? But I think, it's a guy, their tandem is a guy who's trying to establish himself and a guy who's trying to hang on. And I think that level of sort of energy they both have is sort of one of the things that could elevate them. But, I think I wouldn't call goaltending a weakness on this team, but I think if you're looking from the outside, it's definitely probably a concern because the neither guys are guys that you go, man, that's the guy you go to war with, because they both have some flaws and some bumps and bruises on them. So I'm a big fan of David Rittich. He's he's a really easy guy to root for, a really easy guy to like. He's his teammates rave about him. He's a very fun-loving guy. He seems, his body language and his energy level every day in practice and in games screams, I can't believe I get to do this for a living. And I think that kind of exuberance bleeds through the rest of the team when he's in net. Smith has a different kind of energy, but he brings the same level of energy. And I think it's going to be super interesting to see how they manage it. But I think they'll just rotate probably like they did in 2015 because, to be honest, I don't know what other options they have.
Well, Tyler Parsons probably won't play this season for the Flames, but he's definitely is a name that could potentially be in between the pipes for the Flames down the road. And you also have some different names, as I said in the opening. You have Juuso Valimaki, who has seen NHL action this season with the Flames. Now he's back with the Heat. You also have Dylan Dubé coming up in the ranks as well. There's some interesting names in the pipeline for the Flames, but how good is the future of this team next year, 2, 3, 4 years down the road? Obviously, this is a strong draft as well, and the Flames don't have a second round pick this year, and they don't have their own fourth round pick this season. They do have the Islanders' fourth round pick. How secure, how good, how stacked is the future of Flames hockey?
I think they've got some pieces. I think they've done it for a team that their farm team isn't exactly flush with high-end talent. But if you want to be devil's advocate here, a good number of their young guys have come into the NHL and really helped out. Mark Jankowski's a guy they drafted and took their time developing, and he's their third-line center right now. He's been playing very well. Garnet Hathaway was on their farm team until last year. He became a full-timer in the last season or two. Andrew Mangiapane has just been on a tear lately on their fourth line. They brought him up from Stockton earlier this season when they swapped him with Dylan Dubé. Dubé hadn't been playing a ton, and they just wanted him to, his first year of pro, they wanted him to get his feet wet and just sort of really, sink his teeth into the pro game. He's done that in the AHL level, and Mangiapane has been just a revelation in the last 10 or 12 games at the NHL level. Bringing some skill and some energy to a fourth line that up until this season really didn't have that. So in the immediate future, I think they're in good shape. They've got some pieces. Beyond that, they haven't had. I think the downside of having a farm system where your best players go straight to the NHL or go to the NHL after a year in the farm is that they might not have the high end depth at all positions they would like. In goal, Gillies and Parsons have both sort of struggled at times this year. Arguably, the most consistent minor league goaltender has been Nick Schneider, who spent the majority of this year with the Kansas City Mavericks of the ECHL, but he's also been up with the Heat, and he's been, pro scouts I talked to say, the other goaltenders in their system right now are like a roller coaster, and Schneider's like a nice Sunday drive. You always know what you're going to get, and he's nice and smooth. Might not have the high end talent the other two guys, but he's definitely performing so far. So we'll see what happens there. On the blue line, they don't really have a lot of players outside of the NHL system right now because Valimaki spent a good deal of the year with the Flames, and then he got hurt with a high ankle sprain, was out for 2.5 months. When he was out, Oliver Shillington came up from the farm and basically cemented himself as, if not a full-time NHLer, almost one. But that's meant that up until when Valimaki came back about 8 or 9 games ago, the Heat didn't really have any bona fide high-end talents on their team. They sort of had to do it by a committee. So I think that'll be an area the Flames look to sort of shore up, maybe not at the deadline, but probably at the draft or in the summertime, just to bring in some more guys who can be sort of replacement level AHL defensemen and sort of potentially help them out when they need some help. Mm-hmm. Their forwards are a little bit better. Dubé is basically an AHLer. He's ready to go. He was spent about a third of the season in the NHL and looked pretty good, but not great. And since he's been on the farm, he's been very good, occasionally great. So they like him. Who else they got? They got Glenn Gaudin, who was the Western Hockey League's second leading scorer and most valuable player of the playoffs last year for just a powerhouse with current Broncos team. He's really translated his game well. He's not a high-end player, but he's one of those guys that can probably slot into your bottom six and be a pretty good guy and sort of help out with special teams on both sides. Matthew Phillips is very generously listed as 5'7" and 160 pounds. He might be 160 pounds with his gear on, but he's been a small guy. He initially seemed to struggle a bit with the pace and the physicality of the game, and I think lately the grind of the season sort of caught up to him a little bit mentally. But up until the last 10, 12 games, he was purring along at a point per game clip as a rookie. He is a very young 20-year-old player in a league filled with big dudes, and he's surviving. So I think that's something to be said for how smart a player he is. If you go outside the AHL, the Flames, Adam Ruzicka has been very good since coming over to the Sudbury Wolves in a trade at the OHL trade deadline. He's got something like 14 points in 17 games, or 14 goals in 17 games with the Wolves. So he's just been, he's just been scoring like a madman. So he's doing well. Milos Roman of the Western Hockey League's Vancouver Giants has been playing well. Martin Pospisil was amongst the USHL's leading scorers before he got suspended. He's, I think, out for another 10 games because he got this is kind of a weird story. He got a penalty, and then some fans in the crowd threw stuff at him, and he threw stuff back at them, and they started getting an altercation. So the fan, I don't know if anything happened to the fan, but he got a 10, 12 game suspension from the league.
Which I feel like isn't fair. You shouldn't do that, right? If you're a player, you shouldn't do that. I can't blame him. I don't endorse it. I don't endorse it, but I understand it.
A 19-year-old kid who gets provoked, it's in retrospect, if you're from the outside, you'll probably go, well, that's kind of a stupid thing to do, getting suspended, like that, especially the year after you get drafted. It kind of looks bad, but I think everyone involved sort of, from the team side goes, oh man, that's a tough situation. Because I don't know where for lack of a better term, the adults were, like the people running the game, the people from the league, the people running the penalty box he was in, because what else is he supposed to do? Someone throwing stuff at you.
Exactly.
But that's sort of beyond the point. It's a shame for him because he was one of the USHL's best offensive players. He'll probably be going pro next year or maybe to college. His situation is kind of murky, but he's been doing well. They have a couple of players in the college ranks they really like. Emilio Pedersen plays for the University of Denver. He is amongst the leading scorers amongst freshmen in the entire all of U.S. college hockey. He's playing a key role, a key death role in a good college team. So, I think it's pretty easy to see where his career trajectory is going. He's progressing nicely. At the same time, Dimitrios Koumantzis is playing a depth role on college hockey's best story, potentially one of the best stories in all of the game, the Arizona State Sun Devils. They're probably at this point basically a lock to be the first independent team, a non-conference team, to go to the NCAA Frozen Four tournament in I think 26 years. 92 was the last one. Was I think Alaska Anchorage. So hockey in the desert, college hockey in the desert is working. And Koumantzis will be playing in the big tournament this year, so it's pretty cool for him. He was a guy that got out of high school because he was playing the USHL, then moved to another town, and then he got hurt, and then he went back to high school just because he wanted to sort of have a year where he played a ton. And if you're playing on a USHL team, sometimes it's tough to sort of get regular reps because if you're on a new team, coaches have their favorites, and if you come in late, it's hard to get a spot. So he went back to high school for his 18-year-old year, and just killed it. And then he got drafted, and then he's playing a pretty solid freshman season at Arizona State. So that's doing pretty well. One last guy to point out. Again, some of these guys are sort of depth guys, but some of these guys could also be long shots to be good players. But the Flames' 6th-round draft pick this year, a Russian kid named Dmitry Zavgorodny. He's playing for right now. He's playing for the Ruski Oceanic, one of the hotter offensive teams in all of the Quebec Major Junior League. But he's been scoring really consistently. So. Like I said, the Flames, they don't have a lot of high-end guys in their system because they've all gone to the NHL and they're all playing regular NHL minutes. And the guys they have, I don't think it's unfair to call them projects. Pretty much all these guys will need, a year or two to be ready. Dubé is probably the closest being ready. Valimaki's basically ready now. But beyond those two, it sort of thins out a little bit. So in the immediate future, they're probably okay. But in the medium to longer term future, they probably want to bring in some more picks or figure out ways to lure in some undrafted players to sort of fill out their system because it gets a little bit lean.
Now let's say Brad Treliving gets canned right now at 8:13 Eastern Time, February 21st. Let's say he gets canned and you are picked to become the new general manager of the Calgary Flames, and you also have just under 72 hours, I think, 67 hours or whatever it is until the trade deadline here. What are the moves that you would ideally make to this team right now, whether it be for a prospect or a player on to fit on the current roster or whatever else? What are your kind of be a NHL 19 GM right now? What kind of moves would you make to, in your eyes, improve the team right now?
Here's a question: am I interim or do I have a full-time job?
Full-time.
Okay. I assume they're going to fire me within 48 hours, so I try to do a big sprint. I would try to figure out a way to get, if he's available, get Mark Stone. You might need to send out a roster player to make the cap work because he's making, I think, $7 million, and I think that's above the amount the Flames can eat. I would probably try to do something along the lines of a first-round pick, Michael Frolik, and a couple prospects, or maybe a prospect and another draft pick in order to get Stone. And I think if you can get him here, maybe try to sign him, because I think if they move out Frolik's money, they might be able to make an extension work. But that's what I would do. A bunch of us have gone back and forth on this on Twitter today. Just the idea of, especially with the Flames, at some point you got to shoot your shot. They're the type of group where this is the type of season where if you're running the team, you dream of things working out this well in terms of everyone sort of clicking the way you want them to. So I think to a certain extent you owe it to your fan base, but I think even to a larger extent, I think you owe it to your team to sort of figure out ways to sort of shore it up as much as you can and sort of give them the best chance to go into the playoffs with a deep, dangerous team. And I think adding someone like Stone would help that. I wouldn't want to, like I said, I wouldn't want to give up someone on my roster, but I think Frolik, because of where Stone would slot in and his cap hit, is probably be the easiest guy to move out. And I think for Ottawa, they might want a guy, in his early 30s who has a ring, who can sort of bring along their younger guys. So that'd be the one thing I try to do. We'll see if it works.
I don't know if they would fire you within 48 hours. I mean, that seems like a pretty reasonable thing to do, right? You're not trading Gaudreau for a sandwich here. I mean, you're making some pretty reasonable decisions here. Again, you're not trading Hall for Larson, right? So you can't be worse than that, right? You can't be worse than Peter Chiarelli.
Bless his heart, I've had the opportunity to watch pretty much every game of Johnny Gaudreau's career, and he's not a perfect player, but to steal the line from Muhammad Ali, if you dream about trading Johnny Gaudreau, when you wake up, you better call him to apologize, because he's a special player, not perfect, but things he can do with the puck. If you trade Johnny Gaudreau, the next thing you do after trading him is try to find another Johnny Gaudreau. So. Mm-hmm. Well, why work for yourself?
I said this on the show a few weeks ago. It's not easy, obviously, to be a GM in the National Hockey League. It is a very, very difficult and emotionally tiresome position. That said, we are all better general managers than Peter Chiarelli. That's all I'm gonna say about that. Last couple of points here before I let you go: the Coyle trade and the Hagelin trade. Your first thoughts when you saw those trades go down? Coyle got, as I said in the opening, Coyle got shipped to the Bruins for Ryan Donato and a 5th-round pick. Donato, 22 years old. Coyle, I believe, is 26 years old. The only problem I have with this trade is that it feels to me like the Bruins gave up on Donato just a little early. That's the feeling I've also gotten from a lot of people that know the Bruins a lot more than I do. But it just feels like Donato didn't get 100% of what he could have given in Boston. But again, Charlie Coyle fits into that third center slot very well, and the Bruins have been looking for that all season. And for the Caps, you get Carl Hagelin, a guy who I saw on Twitter today has the most playoff experience, I think, in the last 5-6 years. I mean, he's played. I mean, if you think about all the runs the Rangers made, and then he's seen a lot of things. And also, I think this crazy set. I hope I'm not mistaken this, but I think 29% of all of Carl Hagelin's playoff games were all against the Capitals. So now that he's a Capital, one that hurts me as a Rangers fan. But what are your impressions on each of these couple of trades here? And are these teams done? I would feel like Boston isn't. Boston, I feel like, would still be a big player for a Stone, or maybe even a Duchesne or somebody to really kind of put them over the top if they're not already. And for the Capitals, they haven't really been playing super well as of late. As noted by the Capitals fans that I follow on social media, they have not been happy with this team over the last little while. So what are your first impressions on these trades, and do you think these teams are done making moves?
I really like the Coyle Donato trade. I think Coyle's a guy. I think he'll fit in nicely with the playing style the Bruins have. And if I'm the Bruins, I gained a pretty nice piece, and I didn't have to give up someone like DeBrusk or a guy off my roster. If I'm making a trade with Boston, I see if I can get DeBrusque or one of their young guys who are on the NHL team, because you know how they can do at the NHL level. Donato doesn't really have that the body of work yet. He's still, I think to a certain extent living off of his college accomplishments. Granted, his college accomplishments were hell of accomplishments, so that's something you can do for a little while. But he's still sort of getting his feet wet, establishing himself as a pro. And Charlie Coyle is sort of you know what you're going to get, and you know how he's going to fit in with your group. So I think it's a tiny bit of work for both of them, because the Wild got a player who will, as they sort of reload and sort of change up their mix a bit, I think he'll fit in nicely with the team. They get a draft pick out of it too, and they get out from under Coyle's contract. And Boston got a guy who's going to, I think, fit in nicely. On the other hand, like Carl Hagelin, he's not the youngest guy in the world anymore. I think he's sort of the amount of hockey he's played in the last few years might be catching up to him to a certain extent. But he's a smart player, and he knows what to expect in the playoffs, and he's not going to get caught off guard by anything. And if you're the Kings, you get a couple draft picks, and I think they're a team that really, really needs to load back up. They're going to draft a lot and draft early this year. So I think it's in their best interest to just give their scouts as many bullets as they can. So I think both these trades have worked out nicely for both teams. I don't know what more Washington can do with their cap situation. I think Boston will see if they can add another piece. I think adding $3 million in salary won't make it easy on them, but I think they're willing to get creative, and I think they're potentially willing to make some hockey trades. So we'll see what happens with both of them. But I like both those trades. They're tidy bits of work from all four teams.
Last question before I let you go. We talked about this a little bit before we started recording the show. The Lightning are never going to lose a game ever again, I guess.
Oh.
But as you've said before we started the show here, the team that wins the President's Trophy isn't usually the winner of the Cup. Now, do you think the Lightning are still by far the heavy favorites here, or are you picking a dark horse team, perhaps the Flames, perhaps another team that you think could potentially surpass them in order to win the Cup? Because the NHL, unlike the NBA and some other leagues, there's anything can happen, really. The Golden State Warriors, if they play the 8 seed team, they're gonna beat the 8 seed team, whoever that is, in 4 games, no matter what. Unless the whole team goes down with injuries, this is gonna be a clean sweep. In hockey, that doesn't happen nearly as often. So, in your opinion, are the Lightning still super, super, super heavy favorites, or are you picking some under-the-radar team that could potentially do a lot of damage?
I've seen the Lightning twice this year. Once on TV, a bunch of times on TV. Once, in detail on TV when they played the Flames in Tampa, and the best game I've seen live this season, maybe the best game I've seen live in like 4 or 5 years, December 20th or 22nd, sometime December, at the Saddle Dome against the Flames. So they're such a good team. They're so fast. They come at you in waves. They're deep. They're well coached. They don't have a lot of holes in their game. They have 2 good goaltenders. They have, their systems are pretty good. Their power play's dangerous. Their penalty kill's dangerous. Their backup goalie's good. The guys they have in Syracuse are good. Like, this might be a perfect storm for Tampa, because they have a group of guys who have been deep in the playoffs and are still hungry, and they know what to expect, and they have a deep team that can just come at you with waves of line after line after line and roll you down. They're tough to line match against at home. They're impossible to beat if you play them on the road, because they've got enough depth that they're really tough to if they have control of the matchups, they can basically just decimate you. So I feel like they're a couple injuries away from having their chemistry sort of mucked up a bit. And I think that's the only thing that I'd be worried about if I were them. Like, what if, Stamkos, his leg falls off, and then Kucherov gets eaten by a shark or something. And then all of a sudden, oh no, everyone's playing a little bit above their heads.
Just not a San Jose shark, right? As long as that doesn't happen. Happen.
They go to the Gasparilla, the pirate festival in Tampa, and someone gets eaten by a shark or crocodile or something. I don't know. But even then, like, they've been through injuries in the past, and they've managed, guys playing above their skis have still managed to contribute because, they've had to do it and they've had to learn from it. So I don't know how you bet against them, but part of me is kind of suspicious because I'm sort of, the President's Trophy thing has conditioned me to go, what's going to go wrong? Because I'm thinking something has to go wrong at some point for them and topple them. It's not going to be as easy as everyone thinks it might be for them. But I still don't see how they, right now on, 4 days for the trade deadline, I don't know how they're going to fall apart. And I don't really expect them to at this point, but I'm still a little bit suspicious.
The only thing that I could think of, right, is for Vasilevsky to go down, but he already did go down this season, and we've seen, even with Louis Domingue playing not so well, the Lightning just don't seem to care. It seems like, right, because of the way they play the game, because of how well they play, it obviously matters who's in net. Vasilevsky far and away the best goalie on that team. However, Louis Domingue has a great record only because of the team in front of him. He's made a couple of great saves here and there, but do I trust him to be a starting goaltender on an NHL team? No, absolutely I don't. So that's the only glaring thing that would raise questions for me is if Vasilevsky would go down again, can they maintain that ridiculous play in front of Louis Domingue? But they did for a chunk of this season. So they kind of seem unstoppable. But again, if Vasily goes down, if Kucherov goes down eaten by a shark, as you said, hopefully it doesn't happen, right? But if someone gets eaten by a shark, if someone's leg falls off or whatever, then maybe you can justify betting against them. But I don't bet, as I've said on the show last week when I had Andy McNeil on, who's a veteran bettor. I've never bet, so I don't. That's not my area of expertise. But Ryan, this has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about some hockey here. Tell people where they can follow you on social media. You're a writer for Flames Nation. You're a writer for The Hockey Writer. You're on the Fourth Line Hockey Podcast. Tell people where they can follow you, where they can read your stuff, and where they can listen to you.
You can find me. I'm on. I'm on Twitter at Ryan and Pike. I cover the Flames for Flames Nation. I cover the Flames and the Western Hockey League and the NHL draft for the Hockey Writers. And every few weeks we do the Fourth Line WHL cast, talking everything Western Hockey League. And we're about to come up to it. And they have a similarly crazy stacked team to the Lightning in the form of the Prince Albert Raiders, who are going to be trying to just mow through teams in the playoffs when they start in a month. So we'll see what happens there, because I think that'll be kind of illustrative as to what could happen with the Lightning. But yeah, no, it's a busy time of year. A lot of stuff are happening. The
best time of the year. You got the trade deadline. You got the playoffs coming up soon. I mean, Rangers won't be there, but I'll be at the forefront watching all these teams play anyway. Because I'm a lunatic that will watch Pee Wee play if that's the only that's the only game on TV. Ryan, I really appreciate you once again for taking the time. And I'll talk to you again real soon.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. This has been episode number 36 of Chel Squared. Episode 37 next week. I'll talk to you then.